I'm Jake Lewis, and welcome to the Behavioural Deep Dive. Today's guest is Jennifer Payne, a teacher and psychologist who has dedicated a great deal of her work to supporting educators to better meet the needs of students, particularly in regional and remote communities in Australia. Jennifer is widely regarded as a leader in the field of behaviour support within education and has supported many schools to implement multi-tiered systems of support that create positive outcomes for all learners. She's highly sought after for her training, practical expertise, and ability to help schools turn evidence-based ideas into systems that work within their own settings. Jennifer is the Director of Rypple, a not-for-profit organisation established to help schools, childcare facilities and other organisations create the very best environments for young people. And I've recently just heard that there is a new project coming out soon, so just keep in touch for that. We might get into that a little bit later on as well. Sure. Much of her work has focused on rural and remote communities, as well as services supporting young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Jennifer is well known for taking the research on what works and making it practical, relevant and useful for educators, which is extremely important. Just as importantly, Jennifer brings a down-to-earth and genuine approach to the work, which is one of the reasons so many people value learning from her. So, Jennifer, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries at all. So can you tell us a little bit about your professional background, how you came to doing the work that you do now with Rypple?
Yeah, for sure. So I started out at uni doing psychology. While I was studying psychology, I was a swimming teacher in my summer holidays, which was heaps of fun. I actually did it for 20 years because I enjoyed it so much. And then after studying psychology for a while, I thought, gee, I probably need some gainful income. This whole teaching business has been pretty fun, the swimming teaching, maybe I'll study primary teaching. So I did and got a gig in the town that I live, Broome, best place in the universe, not that I'm biased, and got a gig 2 days before the start of the school year, started teaching year 3 and had a really, really great time because in my first year of teaching, out of the school population, the 25 nicest and most awesome kids were all in my first class. I just had this group of absolute little legends and I thought, teaching's fantastic. I love this. I'm having such a good time. Then in my second year, I got another group of kids and I got a group of totally normal and totally typical kids. So I got some kids, who a great bunch of little legends again, but I also got some kids who needed a bit more support from me than I knew how to give. So after my second year, I went, maybe I need to figure out what to do when kids throw chairs at me. I'll go back to uni and finish off psychology and that'll teach me. It didn't, but it did get me a gig as a school psychologist in the Kimberley, which again, I did for a bunch of years and really loved. But the first question that I got on my first day as being a school psychologist in the Kimberley was, guess, what do I do with these kids that are throwing chairs at me? And I thought, oh dear, I need to get on a fast horse to learning right away. So hit up the Google machine, as you do in those circumstances, and Googled literally, what do I do with kids that are throwing chairs? And found my way to PBIS Tier 3. So I entered the PBIS world at the complete wrong end of the triangle, using escalation profiles and functional behaviour assessments to try and figure out what do we do for those kids throwing chairs. Bit more time Googling led me to realise that I had completely gone in at the wrong end and led me to come back to Tier 1. And once I kind of figured out, this is about changing schools so that they fit humans a bit better rather than changing humans so that they fit schools, I thought, I like this. I think this will be what I do. And so that's what I do now. So I wish it came from a place of being truly excellent, but actually it came from a place of floundering and struggling and thinking there's got to be a better way and someone that's not me has got to know it. Turns out lots of people that were not me knew that, but I've found out from them that there are ways that we can do things that work a bit better now.
Yeah, I've definitely been there before when you've had that question and you've got onto the old Google. And then how did you transfer from the department, I suppose, to working with Rypple?
Yeah, so my colleague, Dr. Sharon Telfer, who has now retired, and I were just sitting around one day going, we really want to do PBIS and we really want to do it properly. Okay, how did it work in the US? What can we take from, what we've learned from the US experience? Let's just set up a not-for-profit organisation. which sounds like a good idea. It involves a bit more paperwork than I kind of originally expected. But yeah, that's how Ripple came to be, was, okay, let's just do this. And we're supported so much by Dr. Tim Lewis, who came out and spent weeks with us, mentoring us and supporting us and doing lots and lots of training for schools, and has supported us and been co-director ever since that time. So we're very, very grateful. So how did we get started? A lot of enthusiasm, not a lot of skill in running an organisation, but a lot of support from Dr. Tim Lewis and other directors of the National Centre.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a dream team in there, working with schools to support students, which is great. Yeah. Now, I know you've already touched on, you mentioned tier 3 and then transitioned to tier 1 a little bit. The topic that we want to sort of delve into today is around acknowledgement systems and its relation to what we term motivation, particularly student motivation. Yep. Working in schools and going into schools, we see a lot of different acknowledgement systems, whether it be some sort of raffle ticket setup or electronic system that schools are using. What is an acknowledgement system when we look at it? How do we define an acknowledgement system?
So my definition of this has changed a lot over the years. I would say that ideally an acknowledgement system is a system that does two things. Number one, it is an assessment of skills. Number two, it is a reminder system for adults. So whilst it might be thought of as an acknowledgement system or a reward system, I reckon if we reframe our thinking a little bit, that we're trying to assess skills and we're trying to remind adults to use an effective practice, that's what the ideal acknowledgement system is. In the past, when we've thought of it as a reward system, it's been something that we give to students in order to change student behaviour. But I think if we just reframe it a little bit as we're assessing what skills our students are good at and perhaps what they're not so good at, and then we're using it as a reminder to adults to prompt their use of effective practices, we can kind of reconceptualize what our acknowledgement systems are a little bit and hopefully deal with some of the misconceptions about them that definitely do occur.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard it phrased that way before in terms of the assessing skills and using it as a reminder system for the adults. What would that look like within a school? Is there an example that you can attach that to?
Yeah, so lots of schools do things like point systems and token systems and those kind of things, and they're really good. They're actually what we want. So, for example, when a student demonstrates one of the behaviours from our curriculum, our matrix, a teacher or an adult in the school might say, "Hey, thanks for being safe and walking on the veranda. I'm going to, attach 1 point to your name, or I'm going to attach a token to your name." And those points might add up to something that might be a tangible or an experience, or those tickets might go into a raffle or something. Those things are fine, and we can certainly attach tangibles and experiences to them. But what I'd like to get us to think about the purpose of that, the purpose of doing that, the purpose of attaching a point or a ticket or a token to that student's performance of that action. It's to look at that data that comes out of that, the tickets or the tokens, and look at what are they for? What skills are we seeing our students demonstrate frequently, and therefore also what skills are our students not demonstrating as frequently? Who is demonstrating those successful skills at a high rate, and therefore who is not demonstrating them at such a high rate and might need some more help? And which of our adults are using that practice of specific positive feedback, which is actually the purpose of the token, to remind the specific positive feedback, remind us as the adults to use that specific positive feedback. Which of our adults are doing that at really high rates, at the rates that the research says kids need to be successful, and which of our adults could use some more help to use that practice? So when I'm, as a classroom teacher, sitting down and looking at my data, which might be something like Class Dojo. I'm not advertising any system in particular, it's just one that exists and is free. The purpose of that is not really for the kids to win something, although it's okay if they do. It's really for me as an adult to go, all right, what skills are my kids in my class demonstrating that I can be proud of and be glad of because they're demonstrating it because I've taught them? And what skills are my kids not actually demonstrating enough of? So let's say I look at my class data and I go, wow, I've given 793 points for being kind, but I've given 48 points for being responsible. Might need to do a bit of a teaching blitz on being responsible and what exactly that looks like in the classroom. Because the assessment data says my kids are doing a pretty great job at being kind, well done, but our being responsible skills are perhaps less well developed. So the purpose of doing that is to get that assessment of student skills, because then we can do the assess, plan, teach, assess cycle with our behaviour curriculum in exactly the same way that we do it for everything else. But if we don't have that assessment data, which is partly from our encouragement system, but also partly from our Big Five data about student behaviour errors, we're a little bit stuffed, because if we don't have that assessment data, how do we figure out what to teach? So I'm tending to emphasise the importance of that data as assessment data, and the token or the ticket or whatever it is that hopefully kids are excited about. Like, hopefully they do care that when we get to 10,000 tokens all together, we're going to put a piece of black plastic down the side of the hill and squirt it with detergent and all slide down on it. Hopefully not in the middle of winter. Hopefully they are excited about that. They're excited about the experiences, the rewards, the tangibles. But really, it's about assessing their skills and reminding us, oh yeah, I've got to use that specific positive feedback at the rate that the research says. It's actually really hard to do if you don't have a reminder system to help you.
Yeah, that acknowledgement system is so important for reminding staff to provide that feedback, which is exactly what you're honing in on. Yeah. One of the common things that I hear working in schools when we're talking about acknowledgement systems is there's always a big criticism around or comments around if we use an acknowledgement system or tangibles to reinforce or extrinsically motivate students, then that's going to undermine their intrinsic motivation, and that students should be intrinsically motivated to learn and behave. How do you address those criticisms, or what does the research tell us about those sort of comments? Where does it come from, and is there truth to it?
So strap yourself in, because it's going to get nerdy. This is my idea of a good time. So I remembered that. I remembered hearing that. I must have been during psych, that rewards undermine intrinsic motivation. So I started my teaching career with the group of little legends that I had. And I remember saying to the teacher in the classroom next door to me, oh, I'm not going to do rewards for behaviour because I want my kids to be intrinsically motivated. Fast forward 2 weeks, and even with the most easygoing group of students that you could ever imagine in your life, I had a reward system in place. I knew that I needed it practically, and my reward system looked pretty much exactly like the Miss Karen in the classroom next to me. So, but I always had this uncomfortable feeling of like, but I remember that rewards are bad for intrinsic motivation. So how come we're all using them, and how come they seem to work? The kids seem to like the ticks or the stars or whatever that is. So I decided to get my nerd on and go back to some of the original research about this. So there's 2 papers that are really important, and I can give you the links to these. The first one is in 1971. Deci did this fantastic study where he found, actually first I should go back. Self-determination theory is one of the main theories that came out of this research. And what it says that is really surprising and very important is the definition of intrinsic motivation. So the definition as given in the research that I'm about to tell you, and in continuing in self-determination theory, is that intrinsic motivation is doing something just for the joy of that activity itself, just because it's fun to do, because it's interesting to do, because you like it, not expecting any kind of separable outcome, not expecting anything to happen in addition to that. So, for example, the kids who live next door to me, they go out the back and they jump on the trampoline. And they don't seem to really get anything out of that. They're not getting paid to do it. They're not getting told off if they don't do it. They're not getting lollies for it. They just seem to really like it. Lucky them. So doing something that you just love to do is intrinsic motivation. However, extrinsic motivation, which we often think of as a bit of a baddie, I don't know that it is, because the definition of extrinsic motivation is doing something to get something else to happen. So doing something not because you just love it, but doing something because you expect something else to happen, either for yourself or for someone else. So an example of something that is extrinsically motivating is if I go for a run. Running is horrible. Running sucks very much. I do not like running, but I still do it because I want to have a healthy heart. I want to have, better mental well-being, all of those things that running gives you. It's not enjoyable in the moment. Do I enjoy running? No, it's ghastly. But sometimes you have to do things because you want something else to happen. Is anyone else making me go running? No, I'm choosing to do it myself, but I'm doing it to get something else to happen. So it's extrinsically motivating. So when you think about it, we actually do a whole lot of stuff that is extrinsically motivating, where we're doing it to get something else to happen. Sometimes when I'm talking to people about this, I say, tell me what you do in the course of a day just for the sheer joy of it. Just
Yeah,
for the fun.
I was trying to think of that as you gave the example, and I'm still struggling to think of it.
Yeah.
I go straight to hobbies. However, even those hobbies, like the physical exercise, like the boxing and things I enjoy, I do for other reasons as well, like the health benefits that you just mentioned. So yeah, difficult to think of.
It's tricky. So, and there's some great papers which I'll send links for after this, and in self-determination theory, which we'll talk about more. It shows that intrinsic motivation is doing something for the fun of it, and extrinsic motivation is doing something to get something else to happen. So I go for a run because I want to have a healthy heart. That's extrinsic motivation. I wash my darling's car because I don't really care about having a clean car, but he does. Why am I doing it? To make him happy. It's extrinsic motivation. I'm not doing it because I enjoy washing the car. Who enjoys washing the car? It's a crap job. But I'm doing it to make someone else happy. That's extrinsically motivating. So getting that definition in my mind was really important, because I think we use the word intrinsic motivation when we actually mean something else. So based on that definition, two studies are really, really important. And the first one is Deci in 1971. I did get back there eventually. It took me a while. He found that if you get people to do something fun, then just for fun, then you give them a reward for it, then you get them to do it again, and then you take the reward away, they will do it a little bit less. He did a really, really interesting research with university students and some blocks that they had to make things out of over 3 days for 3 hours. I can make stuff out of blocks for a little while, but I don't know if I could do it for 3 hours. Anyway, great study, really important read. So yeah, he found that if you do get someone to do something fun, give them a reward, take that reward away, then yes, they do it a little bit less. Then the next study, which was Lepper, Green and Nisbet in 1973, they read Deci's work and went, oh, this looks interesting. Let's find a bunch of children and do this experiment on them and see what happens when we do experiments on other people's children. And they did a really, really great study where they got a group of kids who liked doing drawing. They got the kids to do drawing. Then they gave them a certificate for doing the drawing. And then they measured how much they did drawing after the certificate. And they found that in the week after the certificate, they did a little bit less of drawing after they had gotten a reward for it, which is really, really interesting. But how much of our time do we spend getting kids to just do things that they just really like to do, giving them rewards for it and then taking it away? Because it's important to remember that, yes, rewards affect intrinsic motivation, but intrinsic motivation is just doing stuff for the fun of it. So I thought, that's really interesting. Intrinsic motivation is doing things for the fun of it. And yeah, it's really true that intrinsic motivation can be affected by giving someone a reward and then taking that reward away. But most of the studies that find that, and there are others, most of the studies that find that are they're lab studies. They're a very, they're for a short time, they measure one thing and then they say, we found this in this really artificial setup, and most of the articles, if you read them, actually say, don't get carried away with this. Like, just because we found this in this lab setting, don't take it and apply it to the real world. And there's some beautiful quotes in the Lepper, Green and Nisbet article where they say it a lot better than me. But basically they say, just because we found that kids did a little bit less of drawing after the reward doesn't mean you should take rewards away. But unfortunately, when you just read the abstract, as we all do sometimes.
Guilty.
Yeah, we all do it. It became a very easy and a very sticky idea that if we give kids rewards, it will damage their intrinsic motivation. And it was probably popularized in a book by a gentleman called Alfie Kohn, who wrote a book called Punished by Rewards. Beautifully written book. He's a very talented author, but because I'm such a mega nerd, I went through the book and looked at all the different research articles that he found and read them, and kind of came to a different conclusion, because I think that language that we use of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation is the point. If you take intrinsic motivation to be things that you do just for fun and extrinsic motivation to be things that you do to get something else to happen, then the fact that rewards damage intrinsic motivation is kind of not as important, because we tend not to really give rewards for those things. But if you have the misunderstanding, which is a common misunderstanding, that intrinsic motivation means things that you decide to do for yourself or things that you're internally regulated to do, then people get really worried about it. So it helps to have the papers in front of you or have a diagram. So I'll send some resources after this that people can have a look at. But it is, like most sticky analogies, there is a kernel of truth in it. There are definitely these studies that say if you give someone a reward for something that they are intrinsically motivated to do, that they are doing for fun, and then you take the reward away, there will be a temporary effect of them doing that task a little bit less in the future. However, I think that might have been overextended into the idea that if I give kids rewards, then they won't want to do anything without the rewards, which is probably a little bit of an overstep in terms of the research that we have to rely on.
Which is interesting, because when you look at the school day, or if you mapped out the school day, it would be interesting to look at how many of those activities that students are participating in, are they intrinsically motivated?
Yeah, exactly. I want kids to walk on the veranda. What? Because walking on the veranda is so fun? Or do I want them to walk on the veranda? So if I want them to be intrinsically motivated, then I want them to walk on the veranda because it's fun. But if I'm okay with extrinsic motivation, then I might want them to walk on the veranda so that the little kids don't get knocked over and squashed flat, so that nobody falls over and skins their knees, so that there's a separable outcome. It's not the act of walking on the veranda that is fun, it's that other benefits might come from it. Same with putting your rubbish in the bin. Putting your rubbish in the bin might not be all that fun of itself, but does it mean that we, don't get botulism from having rubbish lying around? Does it mean that our schools look beautiful? Does it mean that the animals in our environment are less likely to ingest plastic and die of, eating our plastic rubbish? Yeah, but they're not just putting your rubbish in the bin because it's fun. They're putting your rubbish in the bin because you get something else to happen. So extrinsic motivation being the something else to happen. The good news about extrinsic motivation is that it is not detrimentally affected by reward. So which we could kind of make sense, for everyone as educators, we get up and go to school for a whole heap of different reasons. We do it to make a difference to society, to make society a better place. We do it to make a difference to those kids that are directly in front of us so that they get better outcomes, they have more choices in their life. And also, they pay us. Now, if we were intrinsically motivated, if we were just doing it for the fun of it and nothing else, then they would pay us and we would stop going to work. And that's not usually what happens. Normally, when you are extrinsically motivated, when you are doing something to get something to happen, if there is a reward that goes along with it, that's probably not 100% of the motivation, but it doesn't tend to stop us coming to work the next day. So I think it's an important distinction. But it's a very nerdy explanation, but I can give you some papers that explain it really nicely.
Oh, I love it. I think that's a great explanation for it. When we look at extrinsic motivation, I suppose some people can think, and I've been in conversations where if we feel like we're just extrinsically motivating students, then it can feel very compliance-based. Is there a way, I suppose, or when we're looking at self-determination theory, is there things that teachers can do to move students that may be very externally regulated to engage in a particular task to one where they're more internally regulated to engage in particular activities?
Yeah, definitely. So this, what you've just mentioned, self-determination theory, is a beautiful example of a theory that we can actually put into practice. And we can put it into practice at the classroom level, and we can also put it into practice when we're designing our whole school acknowledgement system in our Tier 1 PBIS. So the idea of self-determination theory is there's intrinsic motivation over here, which is where I do things just for fun. Then there's a spectrum of extrinsic motivation where it goes from I do things because the teacher's telling me that I have to. I do things because it's going to be good for someone else. I do things because I reckon it's the right idea. And then I do things because it makes the world a better place. So it's a spectrum of motivations rather than just one kind of concept. And it is true that, at the start, kids might do things for very external regulation. So someone else is the boss of my behaviour. So, for example, let's take a behaviour like putting your rubbish in the bin. When you're 4 years old, you might put your rubbish in the bin because an adult says, hey, put your rubbish in the bin, please. So it's someone else telling you to do it. It's someone else being the boss of your behaviour. And maybe you'll get a sticker if you put your rubbish in the bin, or maybe you'll get growled at if you don't put your rubbish in the bin. So it's very much about the other person is making me do something. And I think that's the bit that feels a little bit yuck to teachers, is we don't want that. We don't want our kids just putting their rubbish in the bin because I said they have to. We don't want them doing their homework because I'm going to check up on it and tell them off if they like. That's not what we want. But that's just one little subset of extrinsic motivation. There's a whole lot more to it, where I'm extrinsically motivated. I'm doing things to get things to happen, but I'm a lot more internally regulated, or I'm choosing to do things, or I'm the boss of my behavior. Just like you do boxing because it makes you healthy and all of those things, but no one's telling you to do it. You choose to do it. I think that's what we really want as educators. I think we want kids to do things because it'll get something else to happen. Put my rubbish in the bin so that the animals don't die of plastic ingestion, or I walk on the veranda so that the little kids don't get squashed, or I do my homework because it's going to let me have more choices about what I do after school. But we want them to go from being externally regulated, doing it because the teacher says I have to move over to doing it because they reckon it's the right thing to do. So I'm putting my rubbish in the bin because I want the animals to not die of plastic ingestion, and I reckon that's important. So I'm going to choose to do it even when no one's telling me, even when the teacher's not looking. Or we want kids to get to the stage where they use kind language with the people around them, not because the teacher's going to tell them off, but because they reckon if I be kind to others, that's the kind of world I want to live in. Or we want kids to do their reading homework, not because we're making them, but because they're choosing to do it and they're doing it themselves because it's going to allow them better outcomes. It's still extrinsic motivation, but there's a shift from who's the boss of the behaviour being the adult who tells you to do it versus moving across to it being the young person themselves deciding to do it. And I think that's what we want. I think that's what we want to facilitate as educators.
And how can that be facilitated? What can educators do to promote that?
Yeah, so coming back again, good old self-determination theory has the answer. We can move kids from doing it because we say, external regulation, to doing it because they reckon it's the right thing to do, internal regulation, by increasing our use of three main things. And those are relatedness, or the degree to which the person feels belonging, liking, acceptance; autonomy, the degree to which the person feels like they have a bit of voice and choice in the situation; and competence, the degree to which the person feels like I'm getting better at a skill rather than I just am a good girl or am a good boy. So we can use those three factors. How can we increase the degree that the kid feels like they belong? We want them here. They like us. We like them. How can we increase that? How can we increase the degree to which they feel like I'm actually getting better at a skill here rather than just I am a good girl or I am a good boy or a bad boy, which is a static state? And how can we give them a bit of voice and choice in a developmentally appropriate way? How can we give them a bit of voice and choice in what happens to them? So I can go through each of those things and kind of explain and maybe give some examples if that would suit.
I think that'd be great.
I'll give it a try. So we'll start with our premise that our acknowledgement system is about assessment of student skills and reminding adults to use effective practices. So I'm going to assume that we're using a points system or a tickets system, something that when the student does a behaviour that's on our curriculum, we give some sort of individual acknowledgement to the student in the form of a ticket or a token. And we use that to collect data about skills and remind us to use specific positive feedback. What those points or tokens might add up to can increase our belonging if we have our points and tokens add up to getting a group experience or something that we do together. So there's nothing wrong with having some individual rewards, but if it's all individual rewards, then we might not have that group experience. So what I'm talking about is, all right, year 10s, if we can get, 20, behaviour tokens as a whole group this period, we can spend the last 3 minutes of the period watching people fall off their motorbikes on YouTube, which seems to work pretty well for your 9 and 10 kids. Or If we get to 10,000 positive behaviour points as a whole school, then we'll put the piece of black plastic down the hill, squirt it with some detergent, and we can all take turns sliding down the hill as fast as we can. Those kind of group experiences where we did these behaviours together so we get to do something fun together can increase that feeling of belongingness. I'm part of something. We do some fun and silly things together. So having some group experiences as part of your encouragement system or acknowledgement system is something that can increase that feeling of belonging. The second factor you go.
I was just going to say, I would assume student voice is important in that too, as well, definitely. In terms of deciding on those particular rewards or those events that you're speaking about.
Definitely. Yeah, it's hugely important for that belongingness, but it's also really important for the second factor from self-determination theory, which is autonomy.
Sorry,
so the idea,
I've jumped the gun.
That's quite all right. So the idea that there's a bit of voice and choice in what happens to you. So I'm going to explain this one with a non-example, and I'm not meaning to have a go, but it's a non-example I see in lots and lots of schools, and it's a non-example I did as a teacher. And then the sometimes non-example is getting a certificate at the assembly. When you do a certain behaviour, then you can go up the front of the assembly and get a certificate. Some kids love that. Some kids would rather poke their eyes out with a stick than go up the front of the assembly and have everyone look at them. If we don't give them any choice, then it might work for some kids, but there's other kids that it doesn't work for. So I'm not saying don't give certificates. I'm saying ask about if it's working. Ask if it's leading to measurable change in student behaviour. What we can do that might increase autonomy is get, exactly as you said, student voice, and invite our students to be part of developing a menu of the things that they would like as encouragers or tangibles or reward experiences. And you can put your kids on a budget, and that budget can be $0 if you want. You don't have to buy them heaps of stuff. You can if you want, but we don't have as much money as we'd like in education, so you don't have to. But the things that kids will come up with is hysterical. So there was one school, Howard Springs, in the Northern Territory. I will name them because they did such a great job. They got their kids involved in making a menu of their encouragers, and their kids said, well, when we get to, and it was a really big number, many thousands of positive behaviour points, all as a whole school, we'd like the winning house, the winning faction, whoever gets the most, we think we'd really like 10 minutes of extra free play, like once a term. And the school staff were like, 10 minutes? Oh, I don't know if we can afford 10 whole minutes of extra free play. Like, that's what you want for a whole term? Okay, cool. Like, the winning faction can have an extra 10 minutes of free play. We'll put that on our menu. Maybe they want to slide down the hill. Maybe they want free dress to, I don't know. They'll come up with really interesting things. But it does, getting that student voice, as you mentioned, really does tap into that need for autonomy that we all have. And it can be a really nice way of facilitating that shift from I'm doing walking on the veranda because the teacher says I have to moving across to I'm doing walking on the veranda because I reckon it's the right thing to do here. It'll take a while. We won't get our little tiny kindy kids doing that on day 2 of school. But if we increase the degree to which they feel belonging and relatedness in our school context, that can facilitate the shift. If we increase the amount of autonomy or voice and choice they have in our encouragers, that can also facilitate the shift, because from I'm doing this because you're the boss of me to I'm doing this because I'm the boss of me. And the third thing that we can do is emphasize competence. And this is where I love specific positive feedback, because the idea is we are more self-motivated to do things that we're good at or that we're getting better at. We're really not self-motivated to do things that we suck at, which kind of makes sense. So think about something that you're really bad at doing. There's probably not very many things for you, Jake.
The list is endless. One of those I'm terrible at, swimming. I'm terrible at swimming.
Okay, all right. So swimming you're not good at. How often do you swim for your exercise?
I tried to swim for the first time in years just last week, and I'd got about 2 laps of the pool and thought that is enough for me.
Yeah. So you weren't very good at it, and so you don't really want to do it. That's the same of kids too. Things that they're bad at, they don't want to do and they don't really want to work on. If I said to you, I've got a great idea, Jake, we're going to do a swimming program for you. I'm going to write it up for you. You're going to swim 4 times a week. I'd imagine you wouldn't be totally stoked about that idea. That we don't like to do things we're not good at, but there's other things that you do that you are good at, or at least getting better at, that you are more self-motivated to do. For me, it's snowboarding. I'm not a very good snowboarder. I'm a very not good snowboarder, but I'm a little bit less bad than I was a few years ago. So I'll get out there and I'll give it a red hot go if I can get feedback that I'm improving by incrementally small amounts, but I'm improving. It helps me to internally regulate my desire to actually go and practice that activity. So this is why we're trying to move our language around behaviour feedback from the general praise to more specific feedback. So general praise is something like good girl or good boy, or you're awesome, or those kind of big statements that are often statements are just about how you are. They're not a growth statement, they're a static statement. They're you are this kind of a thing, or you are this kind of a person. There's nothing inherently terrible about that. But if we think about competence, one of the ways we can feel more competent is that we get feedback about improvement. So if we say to our group of, year 3 students, all right, year 3s, you are fantastic. Well, that's cool. They might be. But if we want to improve their feeling of competence and get them to self-regulate their behaviour, then we could say, all right, year 3s, last time when we came back from lunch, it took us 4 minutes and 39 seconds after the bell to get everybody here. Tomorrow, let's have a try, and I'll put the timer on again, and let's see if we can remind each other and get here a bit earlier than 3 minutes and 49 seconds. And then show them the information. Show them, hey, guys, we all worked on it together, and this time we got everybody back here in 3 minutes and 35 seconds rather than 4 minutes and 40. Hey, we're getting better. We're improving. You want them to be there a bit quicker than that, but getting data about improvement, getting specific feedback about, any skill that we're demonstrating. All right, guys, last time I came out here at the end of lunch, I counted and there were 15 pieces of rubbish on the ground. I reckon we can do a lot better than that. I reckon that if everybody reminds each other to be responsible and put your rubbish in the bin, I'll come out here and there will be fewer pieces of rubbish on the ground. And then you can tell them, hey guys, I went out there, I counted. We only had 3 bits of rubbish on the ground. That's heaps better. I'd like it to be 0. I reckon we can do it next time. But giving our kids more specific feedback about what they're doing and how they're improving at what they're doing, when those are, skills that matter to our school community, that is a way that we can facilitate that shift from I'm doing it because you say I have to and you're bigger than me, which is not really what we want as educators, to, all right, I'll do this because I actually reckon it's important and I reckon it's the right thing to do. Still doing it to get something to happen, still, doing the boring behaviour of putting the rubbish in the bin because it'll get a separable outcome. It's not fun of itself. But if we can facilitate that movement from I'm not just doing it because you tell me to, I'm going to keep doing it even when you're not looking because I reckon it's the right thing to do, that's probably, I think, what we want as educators, is to get our kids to do the right thing when we're not looking, when we're not there to tell them and remind them.
Definitely. I think that is so important. So if there's an educator or a school leader out there that's listening to this and they weren't using an acknowledgement system prior to, maybe because they had some of the perceptions that you addressed or have addressed throughout this chat, if they wanted to start an acknowledgement system within their classroom, how would you recommend that they go about setting it up and about using it within their setting?
So the number one rule for school-wide acknowledgement systems, and even for classroom acknowledgement systems, is make it easy to use. If it is easy to use, then people will use it. If it is hard to use, then people will not use it. So I would ideally love for it to take less than 10 seconds to give that point, or to give that raffle ticket, or to give that token, or whatever it is. If that takes less than 10 seconds, then people are likely to use it. If it takes longer than 10 seconds, that you don't have that kind of time. So firstly, make it easy to use. Secondly, make it specific assessment data. So the 3 pieces of data that I would recommend you collect is who got it. So what was the name of the student? To collect that somehow, so that I know, that young Sally has 20, behaviour tokens and young Mabel has 374. So I can see which kids am I noticing and which kids am I not noticing. So who was the student? The second piece of information I would collect is what skill did the student demonstrate? Because it's not being good or being bad. I'm giving these because it's an acknowledgement of our school-wide skills that we're teaching, our school-wide behaviour expectations or values. So was it for being kind, or was it for being responsible, or was it for being respectful? What was it that they did? So that's the second piece of information I collect. The third piece of information, which is only relevant if it's a school-wide system. If you're just doing this as a classroom, you don't need it because it's you. But if it's a school-wide system, I would collect who was the adult that gave that acknowledgement. Because then we can use that data to celebrate those adults who are giving high rates of acknowledgement, because that's an evidence-based practice. And we can also support those adults who might not be giving as much to increase their use of that effective practice. So if you can collect those three pieces of information, you'll be able to use your encouragement system for assessment data. So that's what I would tie it to. Tie it to skills, use it as assessment data, and make it easy to give. If you do those three things, you'll be able to figure out most other stuff that goes along with it.
As you were speaking, particularly around the skills and its linked to the school-wide values or expectations, acknowledgement systems, I think, are really important in terms of teaching students what those values look like within practice. I know schools endorse a range of different values, whether it be respectful, responsible, safe, engaged. They're big umbrella type terms.
Oh, yeah.
That when we're providing that feedback or using an acknowledgement system like you've described, it shows students what respect looks like in the classroom or on the playground or as they're transitioning, which is another benefit that I've found schools have really found when using an acknowledgement system throughout their settings.
Yeah, definitely. Kids can, the word responsible, for example, is a very abstract term. Imagine saying to a 5-year-old when they start school, all right, mate, you just be responsible while you're here, and that's all you need to know. It isn't. But if they've been told 10,000 times, thanks for being responsible by hanging up your bag, or you put your rubbish in the bin, that's being responsible, or you remembered your hat to go out to play, that's really responsible, then they'll develop that picture of what that abstract means. But it does take many, many specific instances to teach kids about those abstract terms.
One of the other common criticisms or comments that I hear in terms of acknowledgement systems within schools is you'll hear the phrase sometimes that that's bribery, or that's bribing students to do something that they may or may not be doing if that bribe wasn't there. How do you address that particular comment or criticism within schools?
Yeah, it definitely comes up. So bribery technically is an inducement to do something illegal or immoral. So if you're doing that, that's a bit of a concern. It generally isn't. Generally, when we're asking kids to put their rubbish in the bin or walk on the veranda or use school language at school, it's not those things. So technically doesn't meet the inducements of bribery. But also it's about when we give it. So bribery is, you know about this first, and then I give you the thing. Acknowledgement is, I've set you up to do the behaviour by teaching you the explicit lesson about the behaviour, but then I'm going to let you demonstrate the behaviour, and then I will acknowledge, oh, you did the behaviour, thank you, that's the right thing to do. We can also address some of those concerns about bribery. It's a kind of a nice experiment to design a school-wide or a class-wide encouragement system with $0, zero tangible items, and see what the kids will come up with. And if we take the tangible out of it and just replace them with experiences, that can sometimes address those concerns as well. But it doesn't concern me because it's not an inducement to do something illegal or immoral generally that we're giving. And if it is, that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I think that timing is so important around if you come and sit down on the floor right now, then I'll give you this, as opposed to setting the expectations up around how we come and sit on the floor and then catching students engaging in those behaviours and then providing that feedback then. So I think that timing component that you touched on is really important.
Terry Scott describes it beautifully as setting kids up to be successful and then giving them the credit for it, which I think is a beautiful way to describe it.
And do you have any guidelines around how frequently educators should be using a system like this in order to encourage appropriate behaviour within their classroom?
Yeah, great question. It's one of those kind of as long as a piece of string answers. As frequently as we need to get kids to be successful with the behaviour that we're looking for. we've got some reasonable evidence about the ratio of 5 positive statements to every time we give a correction being, at least a good place to aim for. We don't have as much research about the frequency or about how often we would like to do this. There was one piece of research that I know George Sugai was one of the authors. I will find it and share it with you, that suggested somewhere between 4 statements in a 10-minute period or up to 7 statements in a 10-minute period will lead to behavioural change. And that was statements given to individuals or to the whole group. So I could say, thank you, Sally, for getting started on your work straight away. Oh, thank you, Wombats group. I can see that I can hear that you're using your ruler chat voices. It's the combination. It's not 4 statements to every single kid every 10 minutes, because that would blow your head apart. No one would be able to do that. But we don't have as much on the frequency. What I would suggest is that's where the data is really helpful. At what level do our kids start demonstrating the behaviours that our community values? That's the level for our kids. For some groups of kids, it might be fairly infrequent. For some groups of kids, it's going to have to be really frequent. So the level that we get measurable behaviour change in our context is the right level for our kids.
Now, if a teacher is thinking or feeling, my students I'm really struggling with motivation within my classroom, what would be some of the general advice for how to approach that?
Mm-hmm. So again, I would probably come back to self-determination theory, and I would be thinking, all right, is there any way that I can increase belonging or relatedness, increase feelings of competence, and increase autonomy? So is there a way that I can ask the kids, what would be motivating to you? What would you enjoy? Is there any way that I can give voice and choice in the encourages that I might provide, but can I come back to the classroom practice of providing academic choice, providing choice in sequencing, providing choice in how I get activities to be responded to? If I can give a little bit more choice, will that help my kids be more motivated? Can I increase the degree to which they feel belonging or relatedness in the classroom to one another or to me? So would some group goals, would that potentially work if I could get them working together? The things that even high school kids will do to watch 3 minutes of people falling off their motorbikes on YouTube, like, really? That's what you want? Okay, it gets me, 57 minutes out of the hour period of you actually getting some work done, and we all do that together, and then we watch people falling off their motorbikes. Fine. So are there group contingencies that would be more enticing to them that might increase belonging? And can I emphasize that the behavioural skills that I'm teaching these kids and wanting them to be motivated to do, they're not just because I say you have to do them, they're actually the things that matter to our school community. So that's why having community voice and student voice in the design of those school-wide behavioural expectations and specific things like your matrix and procedures, that's why that is so important to self-regulation and the internalisation of motivation. If we can bring the kids in and involve them in it, they'd likely be more motivated. Not guaranteed. I wish we had more guarantees in education than we actually do. But those are the things I would consider. Can I come back to self-determination theory and increase any of those variables?
I think that's great advice, and we definitely work with probabilities, not certainties.
Yes,
when it comes
working with human beings, not pieces of plastic. Yeah, exactly
right. Are there any resources that you would recommend educators or school leaders look to if they're wanting to learn more about acknowledgement systems as well as student motivation that you can point them towards?
Yeah, so definitely I would encourage you to have a look at Missouri PBS, their Tier 1 handbook and Tier 1 resources. They have a really great chapter on encouragement and acknowledgement systems that does delve into the research in a little bit more detail about motivation. So if you need to provide some written resources or some references to people that have concerns. And I do think that when people have concerns and they're worried about damaging intrinsic motivation or worried about the use of reward, the best way for us to respond to that is to listen with care and interest, and then to just provide some information rather than telling people that it doesn't matter, because it does matter. People care about kids and they care about their motivation and they want to do the right thing. So if they have concerns, if we can listen and then provide a bit of information that might relieve some of those concerns, that's what I would suggest. So pbsmissouri.org. If you look in their Tier 1 resources, you'll find lots of really great stuff there. And we're very grateful, and big thanks to PBS Missouri and, of course, to Dr. Tim Lewis for making those so freely available.
And if anyone wants to find you and the work that you're doing, where's the best place to come and reach out? And also, in terms of the project that you've got coming up, it might be add a little shout if you'd like.
So if you go to the Rypple website, there is a contact us button, and we're always happy for people to get in touch and happy to share resources. There is a bunch of free stuff as well on the resources tabs of the Rypple website. So please feel free to download that, take it, use it. Lots of resources in a few different sections. The next project that I'm working on is the integration of positive behavioural interventions and supports and reading instruction, which has been a really wonderful rabbit hole to go down, and I'm pretty excited about that project. And there will be some information at MTSS Australia, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Australia. If people are interested, you can have a look there. But can I get in a plug for the PBL conference in Brisbane?
Of course.
Good. I'm very excited, very, very grateful to the Queensland Department for Education. They are the ones who organise this conference. It's a huge amount of work. They get amazing international presenters and fantastic Australian presenters. The lineup is awesome this year, and I will be seeing as many people as I possibly can there, because I'm just so excited to go and nerd out on PBIS research and implementation. It's wonderful that we get such high quality professional presenters at that conference. But the best thing is going and seeing the schools' presentations and seeing what schools are doing and schools sharing with each other. So I reckon everyone who's interested in positive behaviour for learning should go to the conference, and I hope I see lots of people there. Buy your tickets quick before they sell out.
And if you do see Jennifer there, I highly recommend you go up and have a chat. Or if you're a school leader or a teacher that's currently working within the school and is interested in learning about more in terms of implementing multi-tiered systems of support for behaviour and for learning, then I highly recommend that you reach out to Jennifer through that Rypple website, or keeping an eye out for the project that she has got coming up, because there is very few people that can explain very complex topics as simplistically as you do. You've got a great knack for it. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been an absolute delight to chat to you, and we'll be chatting again soon, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will. Thank you so much for having me. It was a hoot to nerd out on research. Thanks, Jared.
As always.